Hello everybody, my name is Heine and this is Rainier Books. Today it is Friday, February the 24th. 1 year ago, Russia attacked Ukraine on full scale. But I'm not making a video about this. I might make another video about this and about my thoughts about this war of the past and of the future. But today I want to talk about something not completely different. It has also to do with human rights, with civil rights. It is Black History Month in the United States. Primarily in the United States, I think people sort of talk about Black History Month. Schools do certain projects and talk about Black history. And I want to also talk about that. A lot of people publish lists of books that we could read to educate ourselves. I am not reading anything specific in February this year, which I probably never do, but I try to read books about the topic almost throughout the year, not exclusively, but one book maybe or two books per year. And I have learned a lot from books that I've read. So I want to share today 7 books that you could read in Black History Month, that you could use to educate yourself about Black history and the issue of racism in the United States, but elsewhere around the world. So let's do this. I have divided this video into 2 sections, so to speak. I have 7 books for you. 4 of them I have read, I have studied, I have learned so much from them, and 3 are on my TBR and I absolutely want to read them, and I think you should read them too. Maybe you have read them. Please tell me so in the show notes, not in the show notes, but in the comments down below. I am obviously a white, privileged European man from Sweden or Germany, whatever you want, Sweden or Germany. I have both passports, so I am privileged. I'm very privileged because of my skin. It's white, or not white, it's not white. No, there's no one who has white skin in the world. But nevertheless, I'm privileged because I'm not subject to racism, not in Europe and not everywhere around the world, because my sort of skin color has made me a privileged person from the second I was born. Because everywhere, not only in the United States, not only in the United Kingdom, but almost everywhere around the world, people with other skin colors, black, brown, whatever, are being prejudiced, they're being harassed, they're being insulted, and this happens on a daily basis. And in the United States, parents, I have learned that, parents, black parents, for example, they are afraid that their children, their teenage boys, maybe won't come home. Not because that somebody else from criminals or whatever could approach them and muck them. Yes, of course, that's also an issue. But they are also afraid that something might happen to them by the force of the police, because there's police racism in the US and in other countries. I heard about stories from Sweden, from Stockholm, Sweden. You won't believe it. A country that sees itself as the progressive lightning star in the world, but where racism also happens on a daily basis. I heard the story of a black man in the subway, for example, in Stockholm, whose ticket was checked, and when he couldn't answer in proper Swedish, he was almost immediately taken almost by force and brought down, and he had to show his passport, and he was sort of interrogated by security guards for half an hour. Just because he was black. That's not proven, but it's very likely so. So let's talk about 7 books. The first book that I highly, highly recommend, because very soon when you deal with the issue, you'll learn that it's not only about race, it's also about the socio-economic factors of our societies, about who is poor and who is rich. The first book is by American journalist Isabel Wilkerson, and it's called Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent. And it was published by Random House in New York on August 4 in 2020. In this brilliant book, Isabel Wilkerson gives us a masterful portrait of an unseen phenomenon in America. as she explores through an immersive, deeply researched and beautifully written narrative and stories about real people, how America today and throughout its history has been shaped by a hidden caste system, a rigid hierarchy of human ranking. And that's very interesting. She also compares the situation in the United States to other countries like India, where the caste system is established. I think it's forbidden now, but it's still working. And Germany, Nazi Germany in the 1930s. Actually, she also reveals that the Nazis, Hitler and his folks, that they sort of researched how the United States dealt with slavery, how they dealt with Jim Crow, how they established a system of black and white, and about sort of prohibiting the rights of white people to the black people in order to establish a system that they could use by separating Jews from the rest of German society. Wilkerson describes that in her book, but she also is telling a lot of personal and individual stories which make her book so readable. It's beautifully written prose, it's very readable. She also tells her own examples. I won't forget the story that she tells when she is invited to an international conference somewhere in the United States as a speaker. And, you know, in the lunch break, she wants to look at the auditorium where she's supposed to speak, look at the techniques, things that I also do when I go to conferences. But then a guard told her when she wanted to get into the auditorium, no, you're not supposed to go in here. I mean, this is only for researchers and professors. And then she answers, but I'm the professor and I'm going to give a lecture here after lunch break. And the guard says, no, because Isabel Wilkerson is a black woman. And that's something that I would never encounter anywhere around the world, I guess. So caste is also, but caste doesn't only focus on race. It focuses a lot on the economic differences that we have. There are very poor people in the United States who are white. And Wilkerson also shows how the ruling people, how the ruling class, if you want, has early made a division between poor black folks and poor white folks in order to, yes, divide et impera, as Julius Caesar said, divide and rule. And that was established from the very beginning in the history of the United States of America. The second book that I adored when I heard it, I was listening to this book, was a few years ago. It's a winner of the National Book Award in the United States for nonfiction in 2000, I think 17. No, it must have been in 2016. This is called Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America, by a man that I admire very much. I love to listen to him when he speaks on the internet or on television, mostly on the internet for me because I'm not living in the US. This is Professor Ibram X. Kendi, who has written this book. It was published on April 12 in 2016. In this amazing book, I summarize it with something that I found in the Tampa Bay Times, of all newspapers in the US, but it's so perfectly summarized what this book is about and how it works. They have written in the Tampa Bay Times, to structure his book, which he spent 3 years writing, Kendi built it around 5 major American intellectual figures: Puritan leader Cotton Mather, founding father Thomas Jefferson, abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison, African-American scholar W.E.B. DuBois, and activist Angela Davis. While showing the reader each of them grappling with questions of race, Kendi places them in the wider context of history with graceful, engaging prose and deeply researched details. And that is what Kendi does. His writing, his prose is excellent, it's very readable, and that's what I always like about American scholars who are professors like Kendi, who can write in a different way, but he writes in a way so that everyone can understand what he means, and he also becomes a narrator, but he also clings to the facts and to the quotes and to the sources that he has. And in the last chapter, I remember that very well, about Angela Davis. He confronts us, Europeans, us white folks, also with our upbringing. I, who was born in the 1960s, I grew up with television shows like Tarzan and Daktari. I don't know if you remember that show in the United States. It was a show that played in Africa about a veterinarian who worked there. He was called Daktari, the doctor, and his farm. And this is all very underlying racism in it, in all the Western movies. Kendi shows that in the last chapter, for example, how much we were influenced and we are influenced by popular culture of the 1960s and 1970s and even in the 1980s. It gets better with the years and decades. I think it gets better, but it still is something that we have to deal with. We have to think of when we think of our education, of our upbringing, of our coming of age, which was racist to the core. Really. It was. And still it is. When I look at tendencies in the United States, I get sick when I see that there are parents who say that, white parents who say that we don't want our children to feel guilty about the history of slavery, about the history of genocide against the First Nation and indigenous people in the US. We want to wipe that out from the history. Our kids should not feel ashamed. Our kids should be proud Americans. This really makes me sad, and this really makes me angry. We have to deal with our history. The Americans have to do it, and even we Germans, of course, have to do it for the rest of our lifetime, because what happened in Germany. And we have to look at the things, at the past, in order to learn from it, and in order to evolve, and in order to be better persons, and to live together, because we have only this one planet. Okay, that was a rant, that was a statement, and I hope that you get it. The third book that I recommend for Black History Month is The New Age of Empire, How Racism and Colonialism Still Rule the World, by Kehinde Andrews, who is a professor of Black Studies at Bristol University in the United Kingdom. It was published by Bold-Type Books in March 2021 in the US, and Bold-Type Books seems to be a very interesting publisher. I have to look them up later, because they also published Ibram X. Kendi's book about Stamped from the Beginning. So, The New Age of Empire by Kehinde Andrews. Also, I think they all on the same track here, Andrews and Kendi, but Andrews comes from a British point of view. He takes focus on the British history. He takes also racism and colonialism in a worldwide perspective more than Kendi, I think. But they're on the same track. I think they get along with each other very well if they meet or have met. I guess they will, or they have already. So imperialism, as Kehinde Andrews argues, and colonialism and racism is still active and alive. It's just taken a new form, one in which the US and not Europe is at the center of Western dominion, and imperial power looks more like racial capitalism than the expansion of colonial holdings today. The International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, World Trade Organization, even the United Nations are only some of these modern mechanisms of Western imperialism, says Andrews, that become a part of the system, the ruling system of, at least of the old world of... Sorry, I was irritated by that. And he also takes a little focus about how China works in Africa, in Latin America, to colonialize some of these countries, to make some of these countries dependent on China as a new form of colonialism. And he takes the reader from genocide to slavery to colonialism, deftly explaining the histories of these phenomena, how their justifications are linked, and how they continue to shape our world even to this day. The New Age of Empire is a damning indictment of white-centered ideologies from Marxism to neoliberalism, and a reminder that our histories are never really over. And it ends with a beautiful sentence that I will never forget, hopefully. That is the sentence, revolution is not only possible, revolution is essential. Essential to save this planet on which we live. Not only the revolution is the revolution against all the forces that are trying to destroy us and the planet. And this destroying mechanisms, they are almost on the same page. Racism and misogyny and homophobia and brutal capitalism without a social conscience, as I would say, they all sort of are on the same page. They are in the same corner, and they are absolutely ruthless, and they try to destroy, maybe they don't try to destroy the planet, but they don't care if they destroy the planet. And we have to save it, right, for future generations. And we have to live together. So that the Obama word that he once said when he had that beautiful speech about yes, we can, when he said, there is no white America, there is no black America, there is no yellow America, there's no red America, there's only one America, and this is the United States of America. That is beautiful to hear, beautiful words, but you have to fill them also with content, and you have to realize them. And that's what we have to do if we want to save the world. Sounds very pathetic, but it is. I know it is, but it seems to be very real at the time when we have incredible problems on this planet. And so many people are afraid of the future, I think more than ever in my lifetime anyway. The fourth book that I want to recommend, I talk too much, I know that, excuse me, bear with me. The fourth book is South to America, A Journey Below the Mason-Dixon to Understand the Soul of a Nation by Imani Perry, winner of the National Book Award. Okay, I'll come back in a few seconds. Published by Ecco on January 25 in 2022. This is a National Book Award winner of nonfiction, the second one in my list, so to speak, after the book by Ibram x Kendi. This is a book about the American South. As a European, I have never been to the American South. I've never been to the American East. I've only been to the American West. I've traveled twice to the US. I've been to California, to Oregon, and to the state of Washington, but never in other parts of the US. So I don't know the American South other than from YouTube, from television, and from literature, and from the cinema. So the American South is connected with a lot of myths, a lot of sort of images that we as a European have, that even you as Canadians, Americans, or whatever, or wherever you come from, have about the American South. We have the Civil War, of course. It's a racist novel, Gone with the Wind, that we think of. It's the Ku Klux Klan, it's the plantations, and slavery, and football, Jim Crow. Yeah, that is what we think very often when we think of the American South, of taxes, of John Wayne, Westerns, stuff like that. But the stories of the American South, Imani Perry, who is an enormously intelligent woman, she has educated, I think definitely I'm going to make it wrong now, but she has studied at Harvard and Princeton, at Harvard and Yale, and she is a professor at Princeton University today. And Imani Perry has traveled through the American South from along the so-called Mason-Dixon line. That's where the borders between states were drawn in the 19th century. And she tells very much different stories about a lot about racism, a lot about color, about race, but also about schools, universities, colleges, music, sports, about popular events. She travels to different towns. She shows us certain towns and schools and places and tells stories about people, and they all are connected to the history. And they all show how important the American South is for the soul of the nation of the United States of America, because everything is inextricably linked with the South, and our understanding of its history and culture is the key to understanding the nation as a whole. It was a very beautiful book. The only thing that I didn't like about the book was, it's my own fault, that I've never been to Tennessee, I've never been to Louisiana, I've never been to Texas. I should go there. Hopefully I will in the future. So this is a great book. I loved it. I love the prose. I got it as an audiobook, and Imani Perry is reading the audiobook, and she has a very beautiful voice. The way she reads the book is very, very, close and you feel connected to her and to the things that she talks about. And if you have traveled the American South and some of the places that Perry is mentioning in her book, then I think you will enjoy it even more. Now we come to 3 books that I haven't read yet, but I have put them on my TBR for a long time ago, actually, but I want to mention them. I mentioned them for the first time today, at least 2 of them. The first one is called The Souls of Black Folks by W.E.B. DuBois, and it was published in 1903 for the very first time. The book contains several essays on race, some of which had earlier been published by Atlantic Monthly. DuBois drew from his own experiences as an African American in American society, and this book is described as an important place in social science, as one of the early works in the field of sociology. And I know how important W.E.B. Du Bois is for the whole history, for the whole discussion about history of race in the United States. So in Europe, he wasn't that well known, I think, but I get it now. And The Souls of Black Folk, where he speaks of double consciousness, which is a term that people thought was taken from Ralph Waldo Emerson in his books The Transcendentalist and Fate, but Du Bois says that black people, they always have to feel 2 fields of vision all the same time. They must be conscious of how they view themselves as well as being conscious of how the world views them. Number 6 is another book with essays, and this is called Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin, published in 1955. And this is a collection of 10 essays that Baldwin has written, mostly tackling issues of race in America and even in Europe. And they have earlier appeared in magazines like Harper's Magazine, Partisan Review, and The New Leader. So this is James Baldwin, a writer that I haven't read yet, and that I feel also is getting more and more clear to me that he is absolutely super important for issues like that. And the last book is, because Europe also has its share of that Black history and should be read concerning Black History Month. And this is a book that I have been looking for a long time. I haven't read it yet. It's called The Lonely Londoners by Sam Selvon. I think this is the only literary work. It's literary fiction. It's a novel published first in 1956 by the Trinidadian author Samuel Selvon. Its publication was one of the first to focus on poor working-class black people following the enactment of the British Nationality Act in 1948. The Lonely Londoners was included on the Big Jubilee Read list of 70 books selected by a panel of experts and announced in April 2022 by the BBC. So this work is about the Trinidadian, the Caribbean immigrants. If you go to London, if you have ever been to London, you know that there's a lot of immigration from the Caribbean, but also from Africa. And if you go to places like Peckham in South London, or to Walworth and the area around Elephant and Castle, where you find both Black Caribbean, but also Latino, Latinx population mostly from Colombia, actually. You see that there's a big history of Caribbean immigration to the UK, and there are much of stories that are connected to this. And this book by Samuel Selvon is a very early book, 1956, about these people who came to London, who still work. Many of them still are poor and belong to the poorer part of British society and London society, living in the suburbs of London. These are my 7 books that I would recommend to all people who are interested in Black History Month, either in the US or somewhere else around the world. I would love to hear your recommendations. What is your favorite book where you have learned and educated yourself the most? And keep doing it. It's very important, because we have to get conscious about the issues and learn about other people's perspectives from other parts of the world, with other skin colors, with other religions, with other sexual interests, and you know, we have to live in a diverse world, because that's the world of today and actually should be the world of tomorrow, but without the hate, without the conflicts, and being conscious about history in order to make a better future. That might be a good word at the end of this video. Thanks very much for watching this. Comments down below, please. Subscribe to the channel to help it, and I see you soon. Bye-bye.